What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled? The crazy neighbor pulled us over pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway, and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop law. She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard, 15 feet away. I felt this. My crazy neighbor took my new blueberry and raspberry bushes and stuck them in her yard. She replaced them with sticks she found. He jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. Told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise, etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK. Took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. Edit. He actually demanded we pay his legal fees after he lost in court twice. I'm the HOA president. I get elected over and over again because I just focus on things like making sure the buildings are safe and maintained, and that the grounds are reasonably cared for, or the pool is working. I had some guy come in and was all gung-ho about fixing all the things that were wrong. So I said, "Here, take the job. I don't have a lot of free time anyway." So he takes his year term and basically runs it like the stereotype. Everyone is annoyed. I'm still in the board, so I stop the things I can. But we have a couple other obnoxious busybodies on the board, so I orchestrate a coup. I basically make sure the busybodies on his side don't get Ray elected to the board, and then get myself voted back in. He sued me. I think his attorney thought I would just back down. I keep an attorney on retainer because of various reasons. My attorney got the whole thing thrown out in such a way I could sue to costs. So I did. I then went back to running things the way I always did, except I fined him for every little thing I could for like a year. That was super petty. But he sued me. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he has been doing it for years when he introduced himself after we bought the house. He also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard, and he's a really great neighbor, just an older, quiet guy who keeps to himself and eats my flowers, comes over to my yard and eats the lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads to boil and make jam. I thought that his particular foraging was interesting and quirky, so I planted a couple raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago. When we first moved in, on the side yard we share, I told him to help himself to berries any time, especially before the birds do. The bushes have all gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a summer berry haven for us to share. Having a decent relationship with the guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. Your neighbor might be part goat. Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this, he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also, he doesn't yell anymore. She stalks us. Like every time I get home, she'll walk outside and tell me I was either 3 minutes later getting home this time, or that I'm home 2 minutes earlier, and then ask me why. One time my friend and her sister came to pick me up. The neighbor was against her window, with her hands and face pressed up on the glass trying to look at who was coming to pick me up. My friend and her sister were so terrified, they called me telling me to hurry up because a crazy lady was staring at them through a window. I replied, "Oh, it's just the stalker neighbor." That was a funny day. I used to live in a HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and me. He sent a letter to us saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days and in opposite patterns, just to annoy the guy. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night, This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He's not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage, like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly, the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles because she was walking down to a residential construction site about a block away every evening, and she'd grab a 2 inches by 4s and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. Edit. Bonus crazy neighbor stories. I drove 16 hours straight, pulled in my drive, and crashed on my couch immediately. Must have left the garage door open because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they missed my newspaper delivery that morning also. Neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I had never owned a dog, so she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage bag, picking up every bit of dog poo she could find, and dumped said bag of dog poo on my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine because neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work. She would put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees did not dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. Edit number 2. Day 1. I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally, day 1. I closed on my house at 9:00 a.m. and had a roofing company at the house waiting for the call that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out. We were exhausted and all sitting in the front yard cooling off when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and without even acknowledging the 6 of us staring at her, she walked in the front door and had herself a look-see. She hated dandelions. I found this out the first year that I lived there when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way, almost as if someone was spraying weed killer on the stream setting, trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. Being the nice guy I am, I would clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She would never thank me in person, but instead, she'd come over to my house after I had finished and would leave a bag on my front door that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me was like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boyardee stuff, and once a half a bag of wheat flour. Called the police on people parked perfectly legal in front of their house. Took pictures of my partner's dad just working in the yard, disappeared suddenly without a trace, and then suddenly come back home in the dead of night 8 months later. Weirdos. Next door lady standing on her driveway yelling at me because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity. Had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he would drag a bunch of plastic bags full of God knows what to the end of his driveway, so no one could turn around it. One time I came home and he was outside hosing it down in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. This older lady lives across the street from me, and she's obsessed with leaves falling on her lawn, to the point that she will come out of her house and pick up one individual leaf off the grass. In the fall or any other time, she spends hours a day outside with the leaf blower in full. She will go and knock on other neighbors' doors. If she thinks you have too many leaves on your grass, she'll come over into your yard and do it herself. If you're not home. What I think is weird is that she's in her 70s, no kids or grandkids living with her, and lives alone in a pretty large 4-bedroom house with an amazing in-ground pool in the backyard, with a slide and diving board and everything. Nobody has used that pool in at least 5 years, yet she opens it up every summer. Somehow, she likes my family and has never once yelled at us about our leaves, and randomly brings things over like her feet and gallons of ice cream and ask if we want it, because she's not using it. Share your stories about the crazy neighbor in the comments below. What did they do to earn that label? That is for this video. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe.